Celtic Myths and Legends by T.W. Rolleston, Chapter 3, Irish Invasion Myths, The Coming of Lugh. And let us remember that many times before, there have been physical beings that eventually, rather than the servant of God, or a god as people would call it, they actually, over time, began to be thought of as the very being themselves. A new figure comes into the myth. Myth meaning not what's not true, but something that has meaning, purpose, something that survives from something before. No other than Lugh, son of Cian, the sun god par excellence of all Celtica, whose name we can still identify in many historic sites on the continent. Lyons, Leiden, Laon were all in ancient times known as Lugh Dunum, the fortress of Lugh. Ugavalum was the name of a town near Hadrian's Wall in Roman Britain. To explain his appearance, we must desert for a moment the ancient manuscript authorities, which are here incomplete and have to be supplemented by a folktale, which was fortunately discovered and taken down orally so late as the 19th century by the great Irish antiquary O'Donovan. It is given by him in a note to the Four Masters, Volume 1, page 18, and it is also reproduced by de Jubainville. And in this folktale, the names of Balor and his daughter Ethlyn, the latter in the form Ethnia, are preserved, as well as those of some other mythical personages, but that of the father of Lugh is faintly echoed in McKinley. Lugh's own name is forgotten, and the death of Balor is given in a manner inconsistent with the ancient myth. In the story, as I give it here, the antique names and mythical outline are preserved, but are supplemented where required from the folktale, omitting from the latter those modern features which are not reconcilable with the myth. The story then goes that Balor, the Fomorian king, heard in a Druidic prophecy that he would be slain by his grandson. His only child was an infant daughter named Ethlyn. To avert the doom, he, like Acrisos, father of Dana in the Greek myth, had her imprisoned in a high tower, which he caused to be built on a precipitous headland, the Tor Moor, in Tory Island. He placed the girl in charge of 12 matrons, who were strictly charged to prevent her from ever seeing the face of man, or even learning that there was any beings of a different sex from her own. In this seclusion, Ethlyn grew up, as all sequestered princesses do, into a maiden of surprising beauty. Now, if you're going to bring about chastity or even virginity, that's not how you do it. A hedonistic sort of way would be probably the best approach to producing chastity or even virginity. Now it happened that there were, there are certainly things that can be added that aren't entirely hedonistic. Perhaps a relationship with a god who doesn't want you to, or that sort of thing. But now it happened that there were on the mainland 3 brothers, namely Cian, Sawan, and Goban, the smith, the great armourer, and artificer of Irish myth, who corresponds to Wayland Smith in Germanic legend, and I would say Tubal Cain in Semitic. Cian had a magical cow, whose milk was so abundant that everyone longed to possess her, and he had to keep her strictly under protection. Balor determined to possess himself of this cow. One day, Cian and Sawan had to come to the forge to have some weapons made for them. Bringing fine steel for that purpose, Cian went into the forge, leaving Sawan in charge of that cow. Balor now appeared on the scene, taking on himself the form of a little red-headed boy, and told Sawan that he had overheard the brothers inside the forge concocting a plan for using all the fine steel for their own swords, having but common metal for that of Sawan. The latter, in a great rage, gave the cow's halter to the boy and rushed into the forge to put a stop to this nefarious scheme. Balor immediately carried off the cow and dragged her across the sea to Tory Island. Cian now determined to avenge himself on Balor, and to this end sought the advice of a druidess named Birog. Dressing himself in woman's garb, he was wafted by magical spells across the sea, where Birog, who accompanied him, represented to Athlin's guardians that they were 2 noble ladies cast upon the shore and escaping from an abductor, and begged for shelter. They were admitted. Cian found the means to have access to the Princess Ethlyn, while the matrons were laid by Birug under the spell of an enchanted slumber. And when they awoke, Cian and the druidess had vanished as they came. But Ethlyn had given Cian her love, and soon her guardians found that she was with child. Fearing Balor's wrath, the matrons persuaded her that the whole transaction was but a dream, and said nothing about it, but in due time Ethlyn was delivered of 3 sons at birth. Now, perhaps it was Sawan and Goban too, and that's how the myths usually play out, is that you get a woman that's has been so deprived of contact and not taught how to deal with it that she goes all out the first day or weekend or whatever that she encounters. But it doesn't look as bad for her in this story. Same basic result though. But news of this event came to Balor, and in anger and fear he commanded that the 3 infants be drowned in a whirlpool off the Irish coast. The messenger who was charged with this command rolled up the children in a sheet. But in carrying them to the appointed place, the pin of the sheet came loose, and one of the children dropped out and fell into a little bay, called to this day Port na Deleg, or the haven of the pin. The other 2 were duly drowned, and the servant reported his mission accomplished. But the child who had fallen into the bay was guarded by the druidess, who wafted it into the home of his father, Cian, and Cian gave it fosterage to his brother the smith, who taught the child his own trade and made it skilled in every manner of craft and handiwork. This child was Lugh. When he was grown to a youth, the Danans placed him in charge of Duach, the Dark, king of the Great Plain, Fairyland, of the land of living, which is also the land of the dead. Here he dwelt till he reached manhood. Lugh was, of course, appointed redeemer of the Danan people from their servitude. His coming is narrated in a story which brings out the solar attributes of universal power and shows him, like Apollo, as the presiding deity of all human knowledge and of all artistic and medicinal skill. He came, it is told, to take service with Nuada of the Silver Hand. And when the doorkeeper of the royal palace of Tara asked him what he could do. He answered that he was a carpenter. Well, they call Jesus a carpenter, really a hand laborer, and perhaps that's what was going on here, but should have drank more. You know, not an alcoholic, of course. But what if these the people of Donna, well, the people of Donna, that's everybody wants to make themselves the, well, every other traditional people, it seems, calls themselves the people of God in one way or another. But what if these were all stories about jinn and they were never physical in the first place? There are some things going on, and perhaps humans wanted for themselves to be these redeemers that jinn were presented themselves as. And that's why we get some of these myths. We are no need of a carpenter, says the doorkeeper. We have an excellent one. Elukda the Ukad. I'm a smith too, said Lugh. We have a master smith, said the doorkeeper, already. Then I am a warrior, said Lugh. We do not need one, said the doorkeeper, while we have Ogma. Lugh goes on to name all the occupations and arts he can think of. He is a poet, a harper, a man of science, a physician, a spinster, and so forth, always receiving the answer that a man of supreme accomplishment in that art is already installed at the court of Nuada. Then asked the king, said Lugh, if he has in his service any man who is accomplished in every one of these arts, and if he have, I shall stay here no longer, nor seek his palace. And Sawan gave the cow's halter to the boy. And one of the roots of this, if we look into other traditions, we're going to see that the prophet figures, they tended to have a variety of skill. They weren't the best with any of these things, really, but they came with the guidance, the spiritual guidance for all these matters, and that is the more important part of that story. And obviously, they were the best of character that people could look at their example. And perhaps it's best to not have the best in the physical sense if you're dealing with somebody with good character to be in that role in different ways. So the boat of Manan, upon this Lugh is received, and the surname Ildanak is conferred upon him, meaning the all-craftsman, prince of all the sciences, while another name that he commonly bore was Lugh Lamphada, our Lugh of the long arm, and we are reminded here, as de Jubainville points out, of the Gaulish god whom Khazar identifies with Mercury, inventor of all the arts, and to whom the Gauls put up many statues. The Irish myth supplants this information and tells us the Celtic name of this entity. When Lugh came from the island of the living, when he came from the land of the living, he brought with him many magical gifts. There was the boat of Manan, son of Lir, the sea god, which knew a man's thoughts, and would travel whithersoever he would, and the horse of Manan, that could go alike over land and sea, and a terrible sword named Frag Arak, the answerer, that could cut through any mail, the linked armor, sort of. So equipped that he appeared one day before an assembly of the Danann chiefs, who were met to pay their tribute to the envoys of the Fomorian oppressors, and when the Danann saw him, they fell, as it is said, as if they beheld the rising of the sun on a dry summer's day. Instead of paying the tribute, they, under Lugh's leadership, attacked the Fomorians, all of whom were slain, but 9 men. And these were sent back to tell Balor that the Danans defied him and would pay no tribute henceforward. Balor then made him ready for battle, and bade his captains, when they had subdued the Danans, make fast the island by cables to their ships, and tow it far northward to the Fomorian regions of ice and gloom, where it would trouble them no longer. And I have the ship of Manon. We see it in my Wicca Fairy Tarot series court cards. The king, as you would call it, but okay, I've moved it somewhere that's not easy to access, so I'm going to leave that.